Hi, teachers. I want to spend a few minutes talking to you about something that's probably at the top of your list of wonderings: classroom management. But I want to specifically focus on how to establish rules and procedures with your students so that your classroom can be most effective and joyful. Well systems are key. Let's compare rules and procedures in our classrooms to those on our roadways. So think about a speed limit sign. Would it do any good if it were just posted? It has to be enforced, doesn't it? And we as drivers have to know it's going to be enforced. On top of that, there's other things that give us some rules and procedures as we're driving, such as using our blinkers and using that left lane as a passing lane. All of these things provide normalcy and make travel functional. They determine what the roadway should look like and what's acceptable. And they help everyone work toward a common goal, getting where we're going safely and efficiently. Very similar to establishing rules and procedures in our classrooms. Our rules and procedures set the tone and expectations for our classrooms, and they allow our classrooms to run safely and efficiently. So it's important that we understand the difference in rules and procedures. Rules ensure safety. They're overarching behaviors that we expect our students to adhere to. They usually have consequences, they're few in number, and they're just kind of a way of being in your classroom environment. Whereas procedures are a specific method or process for how things are going to be done. They state exact desired behaviors, and they ensure that the flow in your classroom and instruction limits off-task behavior. They're continually monitored and practiced, and they set the class up for achievement. Two very different concepts, but both must be explicitly taught and practiced. Take a second and read this slide. This just drives home the right perspective. We can't forget that it's our job to teach our students how to behave, and it never stops. It's not a one and done. We can't just go over the rules and procedures the first day or a week of school and then be done. So it really doesn't make sense when we think of it the way that John Herner describes on this slide. So to establish those classroom rules, we have to think about that and get started on the very first day. And we want our students to get involved in helping us create those classroom rules. When we collaborate with our students, it shows them that we value them and we're giving them a voice. And it becomes meaningful, and they're vested in the environment in our classroom. We want our rules to be specific, so they're very clear. Students have a very clear understanding of those expectations, and then make it visible for the students. Here's some examples. We want to paint a picture of what we want our students to do, not what we don't want them to do. So we want to avoid those don't rules. They should be positive and presented in that positive way. It's often helpful to have some type of a reward that students are working for. You might consider something like this: working towards brownies or free time, or working towards eating lunch in the classroom or extra recess, maybe a movie and a popcorn. But the class is all working towards those common goals together. Here's the caution: don't ever take away what's already been earned. So now let's focus on procedures. Do your students ask more procedural questions or content questions? You actually may not know the answer to that question right now, but as the year gets started, asking yourself this question is a great way to gauge if you have proper routines and procedures in place. It's easy to get consumed with the content and lessons that we have to teach and forget to think through the plan and plan out exactly what procedures you're going to need to have in place and exactly how you want them to be done. So get in the habit of asking yourself how for each thing you want your students to do throughout the day. Considering things like how do you want them to enter your classroom? How do you want them to get materials off the shelf? How do you want them to line up for lunch or recess? How is your dismissal plan going to look? And then plan for how you want to teach those routines to your students. One process, a good process for teaching those procedures and routines to our students is teach, model, reinforce. So we want to teach and explain carefully every procedure that we want our students to follow. We think about what it should look like and what it should sound like. What are appropriate behaviors versus not appropriate behaviors when that procedure is being carried out correctly. Model and practice is the second step. A common practice on many campuses is to have practice academies where you have a scheduled time to go through certain procedures, such as going through the lunch line or how to walk in the hallway. You actually practice those together. But you can do this on your own as well with your students, right in your very own classroom. Tell the students you're practicing and be specific about your expectations. Model and practice in the way that meets your expectations from the very beginning, from the very first day of school. And then finally, reinforce. Make it a habit to reinforce. We want our students to be successful, so we have to set them up for success. So be looking for the positives, the things that they're doing right. Make it a habit to remind students of expectations and of a procedure before a transition or before an activity. Remind them what it should look like, what your expectations are for what you should see, what you should hear. Having students repeat those back to you, or having them turn and tell their neighbor what they're going to do first. All of these things set our students up for success. And in closing, be consistent. We must be very consistent. When we're consistent, it sends the message to our students that you truly care and you want them to be successful. I hope these little tidbits about setting up rules and procedures in your classroom are helpful.